Moments ago, you heard from John Boehner, the Speaker of the House, condemning the president for going around Congress to pass his own immigration reform plan and blocking any earlier bipartisan plan from getting off the ground. Here's the Speaker moments ago.
We have a broken immigration system, and the American people expect us to work together to fix it. And we ought to do it in the democratic process, moving bills through the People's House, through the Senate, and to the President's desk.
Juan Williams is a Fox News political analyst, and Mercedes Schlapp is a former media spokeswoman for President George W. Bush. Welcome to both of you. Good to have you here. Mercedes, let me start with you on this. I mean, John Boehner didn't say much, essentially. For those of us who tuned in because we wanted to see which direction he was going to go in here, we didn't get a whole lot. What does that tell you?
Well, he doesn't have to say much because the president has said enough, which is basically that he's setting a dangerous precedent, that he's bypassing the Constitution, bypassing Congress, and moving unilaterally on immigration, which what he's doing might deal with a small portion of what the immigration problem is, which is they still need to modernize the immigration system and move forward on securing the borders. So again, I think that Speaker Boehner kept it open to really put it out there to the president that there's one big word, which is trust. And the president surely has caused a problem here with the Republicans in moving forward on solving any sort of or creating sort of this bipartisanship on immigration.
Yeah, it's very curious, Juan, because the president spoke last night, toward the end of the speech from the heart. He said, I believe this is the right thing to do. I feel so strongly that this is, emblematic of what America is. Where was all that thinking in the first 2 years of his presidency when he could have passed this with absolutely no problem, the legal way through Congress?
I think he wanted Congress to act. I think that the Democrats were under pressure in terms of Obamacare and other issues that they felt, the economy, the stimulus, cash for clunk, I could go on. And I think he put it off, and then all of a sudden he had a Republican House after 2010. So what you get here is a situation where, to come back to the question you started with, Martha, which I think is the one on the table, why did John Boehner say so little? Why did he give so little direction in terms of the direction the opposition is going to take at this point? And I think the answer is that he doesn't have a plan other than to speak out in angry terms toward the president in order to appease his base and to say to the Tea Party caucus within the House that he's with them and that he will never do business with this president.
It's very interesting because as we started this conversation talking about what John Boehner will do, there's a piece this morning in the Wall Street Journal about the 3 potential, actions that could be taken by the GOP. And then there's this piece in the National Review by Quinn Hillier where he says the choice is not between one form of action and the other. It is between unconstitutional executive action and a deliberate, lawful decision by the people's representatives not to act at all, at least for now. Mercedes, what do you think about that?
Well, I think that for the House of Representatives, it really puts the pressure. I mean, and this is what I think President Obama is really meaning to do. He wants to put the pressure on the House of Representatives to act. The problem is that they're not going to move forward on a comprehensive immigration reform bill. They're going to move forward on these piecemeal approaches. And quite frankly, the Republicans should take them on and go forward and pass those piecemeal legislation. Put the pressure on the president to veto them. Because quite frankly, Martha, the Republicans have their hands a little bit tied because in the Senate, for example, they only have 53, maybe 54 votes. They need to get to 60 to basically try to restrict any sort of funding that would go to the agencies. Plus, the U.S. Citizenship and Immigration Services, they're entirely self-funded. So they are very restricted, and they need to stick to the message that this president is abusing executive power.
Mercedes, how about they just go with what the bipartisan Senate has already passed now a year and a half ago, which is a legitimate immigration bill that does border security, that provides this pathway to citizenship but makes people stand in line. Why is it, as Harry Reid, the Senate Majority Leader and the Democrats, says, why doesn't Speaker Boehner just call for a vote? The votes are there. It would pass, but he won't do it because he has to play to the base of a party that really is locked in at anger at President Obama. What the president has done is not unconstitutional. Otherwise, he'd be in courts. But he can't do it because it's not unconstitutional.
Mercedes, respond to that.
Right. Well, I think ideally with the bipartisan bill, moving forward in the House, the Senate bill would be one of the more practical solutions to get it through. But we know the reality. The reality of politics is what it is. We have those voters that voted in you know, Tea Party types, conservative Republicans that have their voice and they have their power in the House of Representatives. And guess what? If that's where they want to go with the House through piecemeal legislation that's going to deal with temporary worker program and the visa overstay and securing our border, great. I will say, though, that the Republicans will need to face this question of how they're going to handle the legal pathway to citizenship or legal pathway to residency.
Right.
That is a critical point because 57% of Americans do believe that we should have some sort of path to citizenship.
Understood.
So that is going to be the one question I
true.
leave out there to Republicans.
You know, I mean, what do you say to those, Juan? And people send us, you know, tweets and emails all the time on this. They say we don't need executive action. What we need is law enforcement. There is laws on the books. There are laws on the books that the president, by virtue of the Constitution, is duty bound to uphold, and he's refused to uphold them.
I'm trying to think what they're referring to. I mean, clearly he's the guy who is now the king of deporters. You know, the Latino community was deriding him as the deporter-in-chief for setting records going beyond what any president, Republican or Democrat, had done in the past. So I think he was making a show of being a strong law enforcement officer in order to try to prompt the Congress and overcome Republican objections about passing immigration reform. It didn't work. So when people talk about this, I think that most often they're talking about building more security at the border, either a tougher wall, putting more boots on the ground. And again, I don't know what's satisfactory. I don't know what the bar is, but the fact is there's much more border security, more money, more technology, more boots on the ground in the Senate bill.
All right, we got to go, guys.
And 14 Republicans voted for that bill, including Republicans from border states.
All right. Thanks very much, Juan. Thank you, Mercedes. Good to see you both.
Thank you. Great.
Stay warm.